The NFL season officially does start today, so in today's video, let's go ahead and predict every single game of NFL Week 1. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be going ahead and predicting every single game for Week 1. That's going to include today's game, and of course, we'll go all the way to the Monday Night Football game, which will be the Jets versus the 49ers. For each game, I'll give a little bit of some analysis and my opinions on what's going to happen in the game, as well as I'll give you guys my prediction on what the score will actually be. But if you guys do go on to enjoy today's video, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. My plan is to do this every single Thursday. We're going to predict every single game of the NFL season, and hopefully by the end of it, I'll have a pretty good win-loss record on my predictions. So if you do go on to enjoy today's video and you want to see more, hit the like and subscribe button. But let's go ahead and hop into our very first game, the Baltimore Ravens versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, obviously, this is going to be a really interesting game between two teams that have already played pretty recently, given the fact that these two teams met up in the AFC Championship game. We all know how that game went. Kansas City would go on to win that game, win the Super Bowl, and it would not be that good of a memory for a lot of Baltimore Ravens fans. With that being said, though, there was a bunch of changes for both these teams. For the Chiefs, you lost L'Jarius Sneed, but for the most part, your team is basically the same. You did bring in some guys like Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy to add alongside Rashee Rice. And then for Baltimore, you lost a couple pieces defensively like Patrick Queen and Geno Stone, but you did bring in Derrick Henry, as well as made a couple other small additions. But with that being said, though, I still do believe that Kansas City is by far the better team. I personally think they're the best team in the league, so I don't know how often I'm actually going to bet against them. And given the fact that it's the very first game on a Thursday night with all the attention on this game, I gotta trust Patrick Mahomes. I have the Chiefs winning this game 31-24. Then on Friday night, we actually have a really fun matchup between Green Bay versus Philadelphia. Why it's a Friday game? I don't know. I'm not here to complain though, because I'm super excited for this matchup. Now in this matchup, you have the up-and-coming Green Bay Packers with Jordan Love going up against the Philadelphia Eagles, which last year had a disappointing season, but now have a bunch of new faces on this team, such as Saquon Barkley, such as a new OC and defensive coordinator, and all of a sudden this is going to be an absolute heavyweight matchup. But in my opinion, I just personally trust the Philadelphia Eagles team just a tad bit more as of today, just because it's week 1 on a Friday. They have the experience of already making it to the Super Bowl, and I do believe that this Philadelphia Eagles team is going to have a chip on their shoulder after what happened last year. So in week 1 on Friday, with everyone watching, you can make an absolute big time statement beating the Green Bay Packers. I do think this one's going to be close, and I would not be shocked if it came down to a Jake Elliott game-winning field goal. I have the final score being 34 Philadelphia, 31 Green Bay. But now we get to Sunday night, where we're going to have our very first matchup being the New Orleans Saints versus the Carolina Panthers. Unfortunately, not the greatest matchup for a week 1 game, but I do think there's a lot of things to look out for in this matchup. For starters, we want to see Dave Canales' new offense with Bryce Young. Hopefully that team can look a lot better. I don't expect them to win this one because I do think New Orleans is a decent team, and I do have a little bit of confidence in Derek Carr. But with that being said, I don't expect this one to be a very high-scoring game. I personally have this game going in favor of the Saints because I have a lot more faith in their proven commodities like Chris Olave, a Derek Carr, and Alvin Kamara. And I actually do believe this team could be somewhat good next year. With that being said, Carolina is going to be a better team next year, just not right away. I think they'll start the year off a little slow, but by the end of the year, they're going to pick their stride up and maybe win 5, 6, 7 games. But with that said, I have New Orleans winning 27 to Carolina's 21. Next up, another 12 o'clock game. We have the Minnesota Vikings versus the New York Giants. I'll be straight up and honest with you guys. I don't think the New York Giants are that good of a football team, but I do have a lot of question marks about the opposing team, which is the Minnesota Vikings. What's the quarterback going to look like? I don't believe in Sam Darnold. It's unfortunate what happened with JJ McCarthy, but if JJ was playing, maybe I would say that they would win this matchup, but unfortunately, this is just a really tough matchup. With that all said, though, Minnesota does have the better team. They have the best receiver in the league, a pretty damn good offensive line. I think they can rely on the run game with Aaron Jones, and I like what they're doing defensively. Whereas for the New York Giants, I don't really love a lot of things on this team. I think their defense is slightly underrated, so I do think this could potentially be a defensive matchup. But in this situation where the offense is going to be limited, I have a lot more faith in Justin Jefferson and Aaron Jones, more so than I do in Daniel Jones, Malik Neighbors, and Devin Singletary. So I'm going to take Minnesota in a win here. The final score that I'm going to predict is 24 Minnesota, 14 for the New York Giants. Then after that, we have the New England Patriots versus the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't feel like I have to go into too much detail on this one. With or without Jamar Chase, I think the Cincinnati Bengals should be able to take care of business because they are clearly the better team in this situation. They got the better offense, the better defense, the better quarterback. And as of today, I just don't know how I feel personally about the New England Patriots. I don't think the New England Patriots are going to be the worst team in the NFL. I think that is more than likely going to be a team like the Giants. But if Drake May doesn't really work out how they think they can, then I'm just not too confident in this Patriots team. And when it comes to this week 1 matchup, Cincinnati clearly has the advantage with or without Jamar Chase. They have by far the better team. I would trust that if Jamar does miss this game, they could rely on T. Higgins to make a bunch of plays. So with that said, I'm going to predict Cincinnati to win in blowout fashion. I have the final score being Cincinnati 31 and New England 14. Then after that, we have a really fun matchup between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Atlanta Falcons. Two teams that both have brand new quarterbacks. Of course, Pittsburgh has Russell Wilson. Atlanta has Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk Cousins is better at this stage in his career than Russell Wilson, but I think the situations kind of resemble a lot of similarities with one another. Both of these teams are well put together, in my opinion, well coached, and are looking to have a bit of a bounce back year after having okay years last year, but not anything impressive. And in this game, I just personally do think that it's going to come down to which team's offense could lead this team to having some more points. I think clearly Pittsburgh has the better defense, but I do believe Atlanta still has a good unit in general defensively. So for me, it's going to really come down to that quarterback battle, and if that's the case, I'm clearly going to go with the guy who's got more weapons, a better offensive line, and in my opinion, a better offensive coordinator leading the way. So I am going to go with Atlanta winning this one. I have the final score being 24-20. Would not be shocked if Pittsburgh won, but I just don't have faith in that quarterback room as of today. So until I see it on the field, I'm going to go with Atlanta. Then after that, we have Houston versus Indianapolis, a matchup that I am completely excited for. You have the rising up-and-coming Houston Texans versus the rising Indianapolis Colts. You got two young quarterbacks who didn't get to see each other a whole lot last year. Obviously, we know what went down in week 18 where Indianapolis was eliminated by Houston, so a bit of a revenge game here, but also a bit of a revenge season for Anthony Richardson. He did not have a good rookie year because of injuries. I shouldn't say he had a bad one, but he just had a bunch of injuries, so it will be interesting to see how he's going to look week 1. And given the fact that I just have a bunch of faith in CJ Stroud and that offense, I do think that Houston does have a bit of an advantage here. Now, I would not be shocked if this was going to be an upset and Indianapolis were to win this game, but in this situation, I'm just not going to bet against CJ Stroud after what I saw last year and thus far through the preseason. So with that being said, I have Houston winning this one somewhat comfortably with a final score of 31-21. I do think Indianapolis will be good. I just think it might be a little bit of a slow start as Anthony sort of gets adjusted to the game yet again. Then after that, we have the Arizona Cardinals versus the Buffalo Bills. Similar to New England versus Cincinnati, I don't think I have to go into too much detail. But with that said, though, I do think Arizona is actually a really fun matchup for Buffalo because Arizona is not a bad team. Offensively speaking, there are some good weapons for Kyler Murray to work with. I'm excited for Marvin Harrison Jr. I hope that he has a good game week 1 and potentially has an awesome rookie season. And if that's the case, then this Arizona's offense could be great. But with that all being said, Buffalo's offense is going to absolutely annihilate that Arizona Cardinals defense. It just does not match up talent-wise. Josh Allen by himself will will this team to a victory, so I do think Buffalo will win, but I don't think it's going to be easy. Arizona's a sneaky good team that could potentially win like 8 or 9 games next year, just beating a bunch of teams that they probably should beat, and then also maybe being able to beat a team like Buffalo. But with that said, though, because it's week 1, I'm going to be a little bit safe here. I'm going to go Buffalo 30, Arizona 24, but Buffalo, you might want to be on upset alert here. This one could be interesting. But next up, we have the Tennessee Titans versus the Chicago Bears. Two very young quarterbacks in Will Levis and Caleb Williams are going to be facing off here, and I kind of think this is going to be a bit of an offensive shootout. Now, yes, I do think Chicago will have a top 10 defense, but in this case, the offense for the Tennessee Titans has a lot of things going for it. It's an improved offensive line, a bunch of good running backs, a pretty damn good receiving core, and I think Will Levis is just going to go balls to the walls here and just risk it all out. Come week 1, I think he'll be throwing a bunch of dimes. But with that being said, though, I do think Chicago's defense will be able to force a couple turnovers, will be able to force enough 3 and outs that's going to allow Caleb Williams to get more opportunities on the field. And because I think Caleb Williams has looked good thus far through the preseason, and in my opinion is going to continue to look good throughout the year, I do think that does give a bit of an advantage to Chicago because I think Chicago's offense will have more success against Tennessee's defense, whereas Tennessee's offense might struggle a little bit more against that really good Chicago defense. So because of that, I am going to give this one to the Chicago Bears. Kind of similar score here to the last game we just talked about. I have Chicago winning 30 to Tennessee's 27. This one could easily come down to a fourth quarter matchup between these two teams. Next up, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Miami Dolphins. Now, this one is going to get a lot of heat, but I got an upset here. I do think Jacksonville is going to come out the gates extremely hot. They've looked very good thus far through the preseason. Trevor Lawrence looks really locked in and loaded. They got some good weapons with Christian Kirk, ETN, Brian Thomas Jr., Evan Ingram, and I think that offensive line should be darn good next year. And yes, I know as of today that Jacksonville's secondary is not going to be able to match up with Waddle or Tyreek Hill. That is a big time concern for me, but in my opinion, I think Jacksonville's defensive line could put a lot of pressure on Tua, which could cause a lot of issues for that offense. I don't think the run game is going to be as potent because of the defensive line for the Jaguars. Whereas I feel like Jacksonville's offense is going to be able to produce a lot of big time plays against this secondary in Miami that has a couple question marks as of today. Now, with that being said, though, I would not be shocked one bit if I come back to this video and Miami won like 70 to 20 like they did last year to Denver. But because I don't think that's going to happen, and I actually think that Jacksonville is a dang good team that is being a little bit underrated even by myself, I'm going to have Jacksonville pulling off a bit of an upset here. Barely, though. I think the final score will be something along the lines of Jacksonville 28, Miami 24. Next up, we have the Denver Broncos versus the Seattle Seahawks. Unfortunately, Russell Wilson isn't a Denver Bronco, so this game is a little bit of a dud because of that, but we do get to see Bo Nix be the starting quarterback. By the way, that was a pretty crazy clip of Jarrett Stidham reacting to Bo Nix getting the starting job. Not a great look from a veteran like Stidham, but I get it. I would probably be a little pissed off too. Regardless, though, I do think Denver's offense is going to struggle in this matchup against Seattle. You're going up against Mike McDonald's defense, and I think that secondary and that defensive line in Seattle is just going to be able to have their way with Denver's offense, especially because I don't really know what I'm getting from anyone outside of Cortland Sutton. So because of that, I do think Seattle will win. I obviously think you have to give the respect to Sean Payton to go out there and put a great game plan together to keep this game competitive. But I do think by like the third or fourth quarter, Seattle will start to pull away. I got Seattle winning 30 to Denver 17. Next up, we have the battle of the AFC West, a matchup that I think is going to be absolutely awesome. The LA Chargers versus the Las Vegas Raiders. As you guys know, I am a Raiders fan, so this one's a little bit of maybe a biased take for me, but I'm going to put my bias aside here and just give you guys the honest truth. The honest truth for me is this. I don't think Gardner Minshew is a damn good quarterback. I do think Justin Herbert is a fantastic quarterback. And to me, I think that kind of gives the edge to the Chargers. Thus far through the preseason, after everything that I've seen, I've come away very unimpressed with both Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. I like Minshew. I know what he did last year. I thought he had a really good year last year, but we don't have that same offensive talent that Indianapolis team had, especially in the coaching staff with freaking Shane Steichen in comparison to who we have. But regardless, I think that Jim Harbaugh is going to come out here. He's going to have a pretty darn good season, and I think he's going to make a bit of a statement here. I know that the Raiders are going to have a pretty solid run stuffing unit with their great defensive line, and I think they're underrated linebackers, and that is a bit concerning for the LA Chargers, but I still feel as if the passing game with the LA Chargers should be able to do their own damage in their own regards. I know they don't have a bunch of receiving options out there right now, but the secondary for the Raiders is also a little bit suspect, so I do think this one does lean a tad bit more so for the Chargers. But I think similar to a lot of teams I've talked about, I think the Raiders will actually be a good team. It's just going to take a little bit of time to develop the chemistry with Minshew and Adams, and of course the coaching staff has to figure out their own stuff. So I think by the end of the year, the Raiders could potentially be like a 9 or 8 win team, but I think to start the year off, they'll probably start off with a bit of an L here to the LA Chargers. LA is probably looking for some revenge after what they did last year to them. But with that being said, I think this one will be a bit more of a defensive battle. I have the Las Vegas Raiders losing to the LA Chargers. The LA Chargers with a score of 20 to Las Vegas's 14. But next up, we have an absolutely awesome matchup between the Dallas Cowboys and the Cleveland Browns. Two teams that in a lot of ways are very similar to one another. They have really good Super Bowl caliber rosters, but have never been able to put the season together. For Dallas, it's the coaching staff. For Cleveland, it's the quarterback room. They're two pretty similar teams, but they're two really good teams regardless. And for me, this one is a really fun matchup because I think Dallas is a tad bit underrated as of today. A lot of people think they're not even going to make the playoffs. Trust me, they will probably make the playoffs. Cleveland is a really good team too. A lot of people don't think they'll make the playoffs, including myself, but more than likely, they'll probably make the playoffs as well. These are just two really good teams teams that are good enough coached, especially Cleveland. They got so much talent. And even though I think Dak Prescott is clearly better than Deshaun Watson, I think this one is still extremely close and could go either way. But because I personally believe in Dak Prescott, and now that they have CeeDee Lamb locked in here, I do think Dallas has a bit of an advantage in this game. I think this one will be a bit of a defensive shootout. And if there was any game that I think this one will resemble from last year, I think this one will resemble Dallas versus Detroit last year, where it was kind of a back and forth game where both offenses really couldn't get going, but it was still a fun, entertaining one. It'll probably go like that. I think Dallas wins barely. I think Dallas will win 21 to Cleveland 17. But next up, let's talk about the Washington Commanders versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is our third last game before we get to Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football. A game that's somewhat interesting, but I actually think that this one could tell us a lot about two different teams here. For Tampa Bay, you're sticking with Baker Mayfield for another year, whereas Washington, you got the fun and electric Jaden Daniels. This is a game that's going to be played in Tampa Bay, so that does favor Tampa Bay a little bit, but I think that Jaden Daniels is going to come out there and play like an absolute all-star in his first game. He's going to sling the rock around, run around a whole crap ton, because a lot of coaches don't have a lot of film on this young guy. So with that said, I would not be shocked if this is a big-time like offensive shootout where Baker Mayfield's going to have to put up some crazy stats to compete with Daniels, who in my opinion is just going to come out the gate just playing like an absolute beast. But with that said though, the Buccaneers as a roster, in my opinion, as of today is better than the Commanders, but I do think that Washington does have a couple tricks up their sleeve that could make this game extremely interesting. So with that said, I am going to give the upset here to Washington just because I have a lot of confidence in Jaden Daniels in week 1. I could be completely wrong. I would not be surprised one bit if Tampa Bay were to win, but I got to pick an upset here and there, so I'm going to pick Washington to win in a 24-20 victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Lastly, for this Sunday night game, we have the LA Rams versus the Detroit Lions. Again, a rematch of what we saw last year in the playoffs where Detroit won, and I think in a lot of ways we're going to see this game be played out quite similarly. Both these teams have made some improvements, and obviously the Rams are looking for revenge here, but I just think Detroit's on a whole different wavelength than the LA Rams. I think Detroit is looking for a championship, whereas the Rams are just trying to get revenge on the Detroit Lions. Obviously, Stafford going back to Detroit, going to be a fun little environment there, but I think Detroit is just, in my opinion, maybe the best team in the entire NFL, not named Kansas City, of course, but I'm going to give this one to Detroit. My reasoning behind this is the Lions made a bunch of key additions this offseason. They're obviously going to have a great offensive line, a great coaching scheme, a great receiving core, a great running back, great defense. They put everything together to make this big Super Bowl run, and I do think the LA Rams have a good team that can compete with the Detroit Lions, but ultimately my gut is just kind of telling me that it's going to be pretty similar to what we saw in the playoffs last year, a big-time shootout that's just going to come down to one or two plays. I have Detroit winning this one by 10. The final score, in my opinion, will be 41 Detroit, 31 LA Rams. Big time offensive game here. Going to be an absolutely amazing Sunday Night Football game. And lastly, the Jets versus the Niners on Monday Night Football. I'll be honest with you guys, I am damn excited for this game because you have Aaron Rodgers going to San Francisco, going up against Brock Purdy and maybe Brandon Ayuk. I don't know. Now, when I initially made this selection, I put this idea that Brandon Ayuk was going to play, but given the fact that I'm recording this on Wednesday at the night and we have no news on Brandon Ayuk even coming close to signing a contract, I'm going to assume that Brandon Ayuk isn't playing. Now, I'll give you guys two different possible scores depending on if Ayuk does sign. So if potentially by Saturday he does sign a contract, then that'll kind of make up for it. But because as of today, when I'm making this, I don't know if he's going to sign or not, I'll just kind of give you guys two different options. Now, if Ayuk doesn't play, that Niners offense is going to be completely reliant on Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, and Deebo Samuel, which is three really good options, but you're not going to have that deep vertical threat that Ayuk sometimes does present. Ayuk is by far their best route runner, at least from what I've seen. Obviously, Ricky Pearsall's a little unproven right now, but I mean, Deebo Samuel's not a good route runner, guys, so that's going to be a big time issue. And when you're going up against that Jets defense that's going to be flying around with their great defensive linemen and Sauce Gardner and their great secondary linebackers, that's going to present a massive issue for the Niners. So if Ayuk doesn't play, I think the Jets could have a really easy win here because I don't really know what I'm going to be getting from this Niners offense, especially if Christian McCaffrey in that run game gets stuffed. But if Ayuk does play, that opens up everything now for this Niners team. They're going to have a great route runner. They're going to have an ultimate playmaker in Deebo, the best running back, a great tight end, and a solid enough offensive line. If that's the case, then I just don't see how this Jets defense can hold off long enough while the in my opinion, Jets offense can put up numbers. I don't know if they're going to be able to outscore a fully loaded Niners team. So with that said, though, if the Jets offense comes out playing really good, if Aaron Rodgers looks sharp, Breece Hall looks good, Garrett Wilson looks good, then I think the Jets could win this game only if Ayuk doesn't play. Because if Ayuk is playing, then I easily think this Niners team could get the job done. So if Ayuk does play, then I have the Niners winning 28-24. If the Niners don't have Brandon Ayuk playing, it's a whole different ball game. Then I'm going to predict the Jets to win. I'm doing this one off my head because I wrote down if Ayuk was playing. So off the top of my head, if Ayuk isn't playing, I'm going to go Jets 24, Niners like 17. I know I could be completely wrong even on this one, but you guys let me know. But of course, if you guys agree or disagree on all the picks I made in this video, you can let me know in the comment section below. My plan is to tally every single game of the entire year and hopefully have a pretty good win-loss record on my personal prediction, but we'll have to wait and see. I'll be doing this every single Thursday, so if you guys want more, hit the like and subscribe button, and I love you guys. Peace.